the life and tragic ending of Willie Nelson. Willie Nelson, born on April 29, 1933 in Abbott, Texas, is one of America's most iconic country music legends. Raised during the Great Depression, Nelson found solace in music early, writing his first song at just 7 years old. By his teenage years, he was performing in local bands, laying the foundation for a career that would redefine country music. Known for hits like On the Road Again, Always on My Mind, and Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, he became a pioneer of the outlaw country movement. Beyond music, Nelson is also a passionate activist, actor, and symbol of resilience in American culture. At the age of 90, he continues his musical journey despite having to live in the darkness of pain. Willie Nelson's drug busts. Throughout his legendary career, Willie Nelson has not only been known for his timeless songs and contributions to country music, but also for his open relationship with marijuana, a bond that has repeatedly brought him into conflict with the law. Over the decades, his arrest for cannabis possession became almost as famous as his music, turning him into both a controversial figure and a symbol of personal liberty. The first major incident occurred in 1974, when Nelson was arrested in Dallas, Texas, after police discovered marijuana in his car. It was the beginning of a long, complicated history with law enforcement, just 3 years later. In 1977, Nelson faced even greater trouble while traveling to the Bahamas. Customs agents found marijuana in his possession, leading to a short stint in jail, though he was eventually released. The arrest came with a stern warning and underscored the risks of his outspoken embrace of cannabis. By the 1990s, Nelson's reputation as both an outlaw and a beloved national treasure was well established. Yet in 1994, he was once again arrested near Waco, Texas, after police found him asleep in his car with marijuana. Ironically, this arrest caused him to miss the Grammy Awards, where he was scheduled to appear, further fueling the image of Willie Nelson as both a rebel and a man guided more by principle than by convention. In 2006, Nelson faced yet another high-profile arrest in Louisiana when police discovered marijuana and psychedelic mushrooms on his tour bus. This time, he was sentenced to 6 months of probation, but the incident only enhanced his reputation as a cultural icon, unafraid of challenging outdated laws. The final major case came in 2010 at a notorious checkpoint in Sierra Blanca, Texas, where Border Patrol agents found 6 ounces of marijuana in his tour bus. Though prosecutors initially considered charging him with possession that could have led to a 2-year prison sentence, Nelson struck a deal. He paid a $500 fine and avoided jail time. The event further cemented Sierra Blanca's reputation as a hotspot for celebrity drug arrests, but for Willie, it became another chapter in his lifelong stance for cannabis reform. Rather than denying or hiding these encounters, Willie Nelson transformed them into part of his public persona and advocacy. He became one of the most recognizable champions for the legalization of marijuana in the United States, founding businesses, supporting political efforts, and consistently arguing that cannabis use was a matter of personal freedom. His repeated arrests, far from destroying his image, turned him into a folk hero of resistance against restrictive laws. For Willie Nelson, marijuana was never just a recreational choice. It was a symbol of independence, authenticity, and rebellion against hypocrisy. His brushes with the law became cultural touchstones, illustrating how one man's personal habits could ignite a broader conversation on freedom, justice, and the evolving landscape of American values. Surviving the IRS. For all of Willie Nelson's fame, artistry, and cultural status as one of America's most beloved troubadours, the early 1990s brought him face to face with one of the most devastating crises of his life. In 1990, the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, announced that Nelson owed a staggering $32 million in back taxes, one of the largest individual tax debts in American history at the time. The roots of this crisis lay not in Nelson's personal extravagance. He had long been more generous than indulgent, but in disastrous financial mismanagement. For years, he had entrusted his money to advisors who placed it in questionable tax shelters promoted by Price Waterhouse, one of the most powerful accounting firms. When these schemes collapsed under legal scrutiny, the IRS held Nelson personally responsible. The announcement shook Nelson's world. Almost overnight, the federal government began to seize his assets, his cherished Luck Ranch in Texas, his private recording studio, a valuable collection of guitars, and countless personal belongings were confiscated and auctioned. To fans and friends, the image of one of America's greatest musical icons being stripped of his possessions was heartbreaking. Nelson himself described it as a surreal nightmare, to have spent decades building a career only to watch much of it vanish in the hands of the government. Yet Willie Nelson was never one to surrender easily. Known for his resilience both on and off the stage, he responded not with despair, but with creativity. In 1992, he struck a unique deal with the IRS. He would release an album whose profits would go directly toward paying off his debt. The result was the IRS tapes, Who'll Buy My Memories, a stripped-down, intimate double album featuring Nelson's voice and guitar alone, recorded cheaply to maximize revenue. The project carried raw emotional weight. More than just a fundraising effort, it was a confession, a lament, and a plea to his audience. The gamble worked. Fans rallied behind Nelson, purchasing the album in droves. By 1993, sales had reached 3.6 million copies, a remarkable feat for such a minimalist project. But the music alone was not enough. Friends, family, and loyal fans stepped in to support him. Benefit concerts were organized, personal donations made, and industry colleagues lent a hand to ensure that Nelson did not drown under the weight of bureaucracy. Meanwhile, Nelson pursued legal action against Price Waterhouse, accusing the firm of professional negligence for steering him into illegal tax shelters. The settlement from this lawsuit, combined with album sales and fundraising efforts, allowed Nelson to clear his debt and regain financial stability. The aftermath of this crisis profoundly reshaped Willie Nelson's life and career. Having learned bitter lessons about trust and responsibility, he became far more cautious with his finances. He assumed direct control over his money, determined never again to be blindsided by poor advice or hidden deals. Just as importantly, he secured the rights to his own publishing catalog, ensuring that future profits from his songwriting would remain in his control rather than in the hands of intermediaries. This was not only a savvy financial move, but also a symbolic act of independence, a reclaiming of the creative legacy he had built over decades. Personally, Nelson embraced a lifestyle of greater modesty and restraint. Though he continued to tour and record prolifically, he scaled back the excesses that had sometimes accompanied his career. His experience with the IRS taught him that fame and fortune could vanish in an instant, but his music and the bond with his audience was enduring. That bond had, after all, saved him from ruin. Fans who had once admired him for his artistry now revered him also for his honesty and humility in the face of crisis. In the broader cultural sense, Willie Nelson's IRS saga became legendary. It symbolized both the perils of financial mismanagement and the resilience of an artist unwilling to be defeated. The story of the IRS tapes remains one of the most unusual chapters in American music history. An album created not out of ambition, but necessity, yet one that revealed the depth of Nelson's artistry and the loyalty of his fan base. Ultimately, Nelson turned catastrophe into redemption. By 1993, he had not only repaid his enormous debt, but also reclaimed his independence as an artist. In doing so, he transformed what could have been the end of his career into a new beginning, built on clarity, ownership, and humility. The IRS crisis, painful as it was, became a defining moment in Nelson's life, a reminder that even legends stumble, but the greatest of them rise again. Unhealed Sorrows of Willie Nelson. For all of Willie Nelson's triumphs on stage and the legendary resilience he has shown through tax scandals, arrests, and the burdens of fame, the greatest tragedies of his life came not from public battles, but from private loss. His story is not only that of a musical outlaw, but of a man who endured the kind of heartbreaks that would crush most people. Over the decades, Nelson has buried loved ones who defined his identity as a son, father, and brother. Losses that carved deep scars, but also inspired some of his most heartfelt music. The first devastating blow came in 1983, when Willie's mother, Mielle M. Harvey, died of cancer. Though his relationship with his parents had been complicated, his father left early in his life, and Willie was largely raised by his grandparents. His mother remained a figure whose presence carried profound emotional weight. Her death left him with a void that no fame or fortune could fill. By then, Nelson was already a household name, touring relentlessly and selling millions of records. But he confessed that losing his mother cut him to the core. It reminded him that beneath the outlaw image and celebrity spotlight, he was still just a son facing the inevitability of mortality. But nothing in his life compared to the heartbreak of 1991, when his son, Billy Nelson, died by suicide at the age of 33. Billy had long struggled with personal demons, including substance abuse and depression. But his sudden death on Christmas Day shook Willie to his foundation. For a man who had always leaned on humor, music, and marijuana to ease life's burdens, the loss of his child was an unbearable grief. Nelson later admitted that he himself thought of ending his life during that period, unable to comprehend how to carry on after burying his own son. Yet instead of succumbing, he turned to the only thing that had ever saved him: music. Willie recorded the gospel album Peace in the Valley as a tribute to Billy, channeling his pain into song. To this day, Nelson describes Billy's death as the deepest wound of his existence, one that never truly healed, but one that forced him to seek meaning in his art and faith. Years later, Nelson's complicated family story took another unexpected turn. In 2012, he learned that he had an adult daughter he had never known, Linda Renee Barley, the result of a past relationship. Far from resisting the revelation, Willie embraced Renee warmly, grateful for the chance to bond despite lost decades. Their reunion was a moment of redemption, a reminder that even amid tragedy, life could offer unexpected gifts. But fate was cruel once again. In 2017, Renee died suddenly at the age of 64. The grief was doubled by the irony that they had only recently found one another. For Willie, it was another reminder of time's unforgiving hand and of how fragile even newfound joy could be. The most recent, and perhaps most painful family loss in his later years, came in 2022, when his beloved sister Bobby Lee Nelson passed away at the age of 91. Unlike the other tragedies, Bobby's death represented not only the loss of a family member, but the departure of Willie's lifelong musical partner. Bobby had been there from the very beginning, playing piano in his band, joining him on stage, and serving as both his sister and his artistic soulmate. Willie described her as the heart of my music, and her death left a silence that even his guitar, Trigger, could not fill. They had shared nearly a century of life and music together, and for Nelson, her absence was like losing a part of himself. These personal losses reveal the other side of Willie Nelson's legend, behind the braids, the bandanas, and the iconic outlaw image is a man who has buried his mother, his child, his daughter, and his sister. Each loss has been a chapter of pain, but also a catalyst for reflection and resilience. Nelson has always turned to music as his form of prayer, confession, and survival. Songs like those on Peace in the Valley were not just tributes, but lifelines, pulling him back from despair and giving him a way to transform grief into something that could be shared with the world. Today, at nearly a century old, Willie Nelson still carries these memories as both wounds and inspirations. They remind his fans that even icons bleed, even legends cry, and that the road of life, no matter how legendary, will always be marked by farewells. Willie's ability to endure such profound personal loss while continuing to sing about love, pain, and perseverance makes his story not only one of musical greatness, but of human survival. His life is proof that even in the face of unimaginable heartbreak, music can be both a sanctuary and a legacy. Willie Nelson, music and resilience. For Willie Nelson, music has never been just a career. It has been a lifeline, a way of surviving grief and transforming pain into art. Each time life struck him with devastating loss, he instinctively turned to music as both therapy and testimony. When his mother died in 1983, Nelson poured his sorrow into songwriting, crafting melodies that captured both memory and mourning. In 1991, after the heartbreaking suicide of his son Billy, Nelson nearly collapsed under despair. But once again, music became his salvation. He recorded the gospel album Peace in the Valley, using sacred songs not only to honor Billy, but also to find a measure of comfort in faith and melody. Years later, when he discovered in 2012 that he had an adult daughter, Linda Renee Barley, Nelson embraced the surprise as a blessing. Though Renee's life ended tragically in 2017, their short time together gave him renewed purpose, and he carried their bond into his performances. Similarly, when his beloved sister and lifelong musical partner, Bobby Lee Nelson, died in 2022, Willie honored her not with silence, but with sound, continuing to tour and perform as if each note were a conversation with her memory. His resilience is rooted in a philosophy he often repeats: living in the hearts of others is immortality. For Nelson, music ensures that those he lost, his parents, his son, his daughter, his sister, still live through the songs he sings and the stories he tells on stage. Now in 2025, at age 90, Willie Nelson remains tireless, still performing across the country. He views music as the rope that pulls him out of despair, the bridge that connects him to loved ones gone too soon, and the sacred act that keeps memory alive. His voice, weathered yet steady, is not just an instrument, but a vessel of resilience. Through loss, grief, and age, Nelson proves that music can heal, sustain, and carry forward the lives of those who remain in our hearts forever. Lessons from Willie Nelson's journey. Looking back at Willie Nelson's journey, from the peaks of musical glory to the valleys of personal and financial turmoil, one finds a story filled with lessons about endurance, authenticity, and the healing power of art. Nelson's life teaches us that even legends are vulnerable. He lost his mother, his son, his daughter, and his sister. Yet he chose not to surrender to despair. Instead, he transformed grief into music, proving that creativity can be a sanctuary in times of darkness. His financial crisis with the IRS, once capable of destroying his career, became an opportunity to rebuild, reclaim ownership, and inspire others with honesty. Nelson's advocacy for personal freedom, his resilience against scandal, and his refusal to conform remind us that true strength lies not in avoiding hardship, but in rising after each fall. Today, at 90, he continues to perform, embodying his own philosophy. Living in the hearts of others is immortality. The lesson is clear. Life will test us with loss, injustice, and loneliness, but passion, integrity, and the will to keep creating can turn wounds into wisdom and scars into legacies. If Willie Nelson's story inspired you, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more timeless journeys ahead.